She served divorce papers to her bedridden husband so she could marry her billionaire lover, right there beside his hospital bed. The man she once promised to love for life had become paralyzed, helpless, and abandoned. To her, he was a future she refused to carry. So she signed the papers, walked out of the hospital, and straight into the arms of a billionaire. But what she didn't know was this: the man she had just discarded like broken furniture was about to inherit control of a $500 billion global banking empire from a father she believed had disowned him forever. 5 years later, when her billionaire marriage collapsed and she returned to the man she betrayed, what he did next left everyone speechless. How did a brilliant man end up trapped in a hospital bed? Why did the woman who once loved him abandon him so easily? And what happened during those 5 years that turned a broken man into someone powerful enough to destroy a billionaire? The answer begins with Ethan Caldwell. Before the accident, Ethan Caldwell lived a life that confused high society elites. He was the only son of Robert Caldwell, founder of the colossal financial empire Caldwell Global Bank, a banking institution operating across 47 countries and quietly controlling hundreds of billions in global assets. Yet Ethan refused to join the empire. Years earlier, during a tense dinner in Robert Caldwell's Manhattan penthouse, Ethan had pushed away a contract that would have made him a senior executive in the bank. "I'm not interested in managing money," Ethan said calmly. "I want to build things that actually help people." Robert's voice had turned icy. "You're walking away from a dynasty." That argument became the fracture that separated father and son. Instead of banking, Ethan built a respected career as a robotics engineer, specializing in neurological rehabilitation technology. His lab worked on AI-driven systems that helped patients regain movement after spinal injuries. Ironically, the technology he built for others would soon become the one thing he needed most. The night that changed everything started like any other. Ethan was driving home from his research lab when a delivery truck ran a red light at full speed. The crash sounded like an explosion. Metal crushed inward. Glass shattered across the road. Ethan's car spun violently before slamming into a concrete divider. When he woke, days later, inside a rehabilitation hospital, the doctor stood quietly beside his bed. "Your spinal cord suffered severe trauma," one of them said gently. Ethan tried to move his legs. Nothing happened. Weeks turned into months. The once confident engineer now struggled to sit upright without assistance. The hospital room slowly became his entire world. At first, his wife visited daily. Vanessa Caldwell had always loved the lifestyle Ethan's family name provided. Even before their marriage, she admired the prestige attached to the Caldwell name. But hospital corridors were not the life she had imagined. Her visits grew shorter, her tone colder. Then one afternoon, she entered the room wearing a sleek designer coat and expensive jewelry Ethan had never seen before. She placed a thin folder on the hospital tray. Ethan opened it slowly. "Divorce papers." "I can't live like this, Ethan," Vanessa said flatly. He stared at her in disbelief. "You're serious?" "I refuse to spend my life pushing a wheelchair." She paused, then added quietly, "There's someone else." That someone was Victor Langford, a flamboyant billionaire known across financial media for aggressive tech acquisitions and extravagant wealth. Vanessa signed the papers beside Ethan's hospital bed. 2 weeks later, photos of her luxury wedding to Victor Langford flooded social media. And while the world admired their glamorous union, Ethan Caldwell lay alone in the hospital bed she had abandoned. What no one knew yet was that far away, Robert Caldwell had just suffered a fatal stroke. And before he died, he left behind a decision that would soon reshape every life connected to his son. While Vanessa Caldwell celebrated her new life among billionaires, Ethan Caldwell remained trapped in a quiet rehabilitation hospital room where days blended into each other. The machines beside his bed beeped steadily. Outside his window, the world kept moving. Cars passing, people walking, lives continuing. Inside that room, time felt frozen. Ethan struggled with a frustration deeper than pain. The man who once built advanced robotic systems now needed help just to adjust his blanket. Most hospital staff treated him with professional distance, except one person. Late every evening, long after the doctors had finished their rounds, Maya Torres entered the room pushing a cleaning cart. Maya worked the night shift as part of the hospital's sanitation team. She had taken the job years earlier after her mother's medical bills forced her to leave college. Unlike most people, she spoke to Ethan normally, not with pity, not with awkward sympathy. One night she noticed Ethan staring at the water cup placed just beyond his reach. Without saying anything, she gently moved it closer. "You know," she said casually while wiping down a counter, "most people here yell at the nurses when things get hard." Ethan forced a tired smile. "Maybe they have better reasons." Maya shrugged. "Or maybe they quit too early." That small conversation became the beginning of a routine. Every night she would stop for a few minutes while cleaning his room. Sometimes she helped him adjust his pillows. Sometimes she encouraged him during the painful physiotherapy exercises he had begun attempting again. The doctors had warned him that recovery would require relentless effort. Many patients gave up. Maya refused to let Ethan be one of them. "You built machines to help people walk again," she reminded him one evening. "Now you're telling me you won't fight to walk yourself." Those words stayed with him. Slowly, almost painfully slowly, Ethan began pushing himself harder during therapy. Weeks later, he regained small movements in his fingers. Months later, he could lift his arms without assistance. The progress surprised even his doctors. One quiet night, while Maya was wiping down the windowsill, she noticed an unopened envelope sitting on Ethan's bedside table. The envelope had a formal seal, the name Caldwell Global Trust printed across the front. "You're not going to open that?" she asked. Ethan looked away. "It's probably from my father's lawyers," he said quietly. Memories surfaced of his last conversation with Robert Caldwell. The anger, the slammed door, the words that ended their relationship. "He made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with me." Maya studied the envelope again. Then why would his lawyers keep sending letters? Ethan hesitated. In truth, the letter had arrived shortly after news reached him that his father had died from a sudden stroke. He had never opened it. Part of him feared it contained nothing but final confirmation that he had been cut out of the Caldwell legacy completely. Maya placed the envelope gently in his hands. "Running from bad news doesn't change it," she said. "But sometimes, it isn't bad news." Ethan stared at the envelope for several seconds, then slowly opened it. Inside was a letter from the legal trustees of Caldwell Global Bank, and the words he read next made his heart stop. His father had left him the controlling inheritance of the entire Caldwell financial empire. $500 billion. But the letter also contained something unexpected, a condition Robert Caldwell had written himself, one that explained why Ethan hadn't been told immediately, and why the trustees had been watching him quietly this entire time. Ethan Caldwell read the letter 3 times before he finally believed it. The document from the trustees of Caldwell Global Bank confirmed something almost impossible to process. His father, Robert Caldwell, had left him the controlling inheritance of the entire banking empire. $500 billion in global assets. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he finished the final paragraph. Maya watched quietly. "What does it say?" she asked. Ethan exhaled slowly. "It says, 'My father left me everything.'" Her eyebrows lifted. "Everything?" "The entire bank." But the letter contained one more condition, something Robert Caldwell had written personally. The trustees were instructed not to immediately hand control of the empire to Ethan. Instead, they were ordered to observe him quietly for a period of time. Robert had believed Ethan possessed something more valuable than financial greed: integrity. However, Robert had also feared that sudden wealth might corrupt him, the way it had corrupted other members of the Caldwell family. So he designed a test. Ethan would only receive full authority over the empire after he proved he could rebuild his life without relying on the inheritance. As Ethan finished explaining the condition, Maya leaned back against the counter. "So basically," she said, "your father wanted proof that you wouldn't quit when life knocked you down." Ethan nodded slowly. The strange thing was that the test had already begun long before he knew it existed. The trustees had quietly monitored his recovery for months, his determination to keep fighting through therapy, his refusal to give up, his quiet resilience after Vanessa left him. Eventually, the results convinced them. Within weeks, the trustees arranged a private meeting. For the first time since his father's death, Ethan entered the towering headquarters of Caldwell Global Bank. The scale of the empire stunned him. Glass skyscrapers, international trading floors, financial analysts moving billions of dollars with a few keyboard strokes. Now, it all belonged to him. But Ethan's first investment wasn't money. It was his body. With access to the world's best medical specialists, funded quietly through the bank's resources, Ethan underwent advanced neurological therapy programs. The treatments were brutal. Months of painful rehabilitation. Countless hours of retraining muscles that had forgotten how to move. Maya remained there through it all. She attended therapy sessions, encouraged him through setbacks, reminded him daily that the man who built machines to restore movement couldn't surrender to paralysis. 2 years later, Ethan Caldwell took his first independent steps. Slow, unsteady, but real. The doctors applauded. Maya wiped tears from her eyes. The man Vanessa abandoned in a hospital bed could now walk again. But Ethan wasn't finished rebuilding his life. While studying financial reports inside Caldwell Global Bank, he noticed something interesting. A familiar name appearing repeatedly in risk reports. Victor Langford, the billionaire who had married Vanessa. Victor's tech empire looked impressive on the surface. Private jets, global offices, extravagant acquisitions. But Ethan quickly recognized the fragile structure beneath it. Victor had built his fortune using massive leveraged debt, risky loans, speculative tech investments. If the market shifted even slightly, his empire would collapse. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the financial charts. For the first time since the hospital room, a quiet thought crossed his mind. Not anger, not revenge, opportunity. Because Victor Langford had just made a very dangerous financial mistake, and the only institution capable of saving him was now controlled by Ethan Caldwell. Victor Langford never saw the trap forming beneath his empire. For years, Victor Langford had built his reputation as a fearless tech billionaire. Financial news channels praised his aggressive acquisitions and billion-dollar deals. His companies bought artificial intelligence startups, semiconductor ventures, and experimental robotics firms across the world. To outsiders, Victor looked unstoppable. But inside the financial reports of Caldwell Global Bank, analysts were quietly flagging something dangerous. Victor's empire was built on debt, massive leveraged loans backed by company shares and speculative valuations. If even one sector collapsed, the chain reaction would be catastrophic. And then it happened. A sudden global semiconductor downturn wiped billions off tech markets. Several of Victor's investments began bleeding money almost overnight. Banks that had previously competed to finance him now refused to refinance his debts. Victor panicked. Only one institution offered help: Caldwell Global Bank. Victor didn't know the bank was now controlled by Ethan Caldwell. Inside a quiet executive office, Ethan approved the refinancing agreement personally. But there was a condition hidden deep within the contract. Every major asset Victor owned would be used as collateral. Companies, patents, private jets, real estate. Victor signed without hesitation. He believed the market would rebound quickly. It didn't. 18 months later, Victor Langford defaulted. Under the terms of the loan agreement, Caldwell Global Bank seized control of every asset connected to Langford's empire. Financial headlines exploded across the world. Largest corporate seizure in tech history. Victor Langford was bankrupt overnight. The collapse destroyed more than his fortune. It destroyed his marriage. That night, Victor stumbled into his mansion furious and drunk. Vanessa waited in the living room, pale after reading the news. "You said everything was fine," she whispered. Victor slammed a glass against the wall. "You brought bad luck into my life," he shouted. The glamorous billionaire marriage that once dominated magazines collapsed into bitter arguments and desperation. Within months, their money was gone, their staff dismissed, their properties seized. One freezing winter night, Victor threw Vanessa's suitcase onto the street. "Get out," he snarled. "I should have never married you." The door slammed shut behind her. Homeless and desperate, Vanessa searched for the only man she believed might still take her back. 5 years had passed since she walked out of that hospital room. She assumed Ethan Caldwell was still weak, still broken, still alone. Instead, she arrived at the towering headquarters of Caldwell Global Bank. Inside the lobby, security stopped her. "I need to see Ethan Caldwell," she demanded. Moments later, elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped out in a tailored suit, walking confidently. Beside him stood Maya Torres, now his wife and partner in the Caldwell Foundation. Vanessa fell to her knees. "Ethan, please," she cried. "I made a mistake." Ethan looked down at her calmly. "Do you remember what you told me the day you left?" She nodded weakly. "You said you refused to spend your life pushing a wheelchair." He gestured toward the security desk. A wheelchair was rolled forward. Vanessa looked confused. Ethan handed her a document. It was an employment contract. Caldwell Global Bank had recently purchased the rehabilitation hospital where she had divorced him. Vanessa's only available job, due to the debts attached to her failed marriage, was janitorial staff, cleaning floors, pushing wheelchairs, helping disabled patients, for the next 10 years, exactly where she abandoned him. As security escorted her away, Maya took Ethan's hand. The man Vanessa once called worthless had risen stronger than anyone imagined, and the woman who stayed when he had nothing now stood beside him as his queen,